Good evening. This is Tom Alexander. It is Wednesday, November 6th. It is the day after the U.S. elections, and we seem to have survived as a nation. Somehow, things are calmer than I think anyone of us would have expected. The results seem to be being accepted, all of those wonderful things that can occur in a democracy and appear to have occurred in this time around in the U.S. Okay. So, as far as the stock market is concerned, it's straight up. The stock market apparently likes the results of the election, and let's talk about it. We're straight up. Oh, by the way, before I forget, if you're finding me for the first time, you can find this report. You can get the PDF. Let me show. You can go to alexandertrading.com here, go to weekly update. These are all free reports. This is the report for today. You can get the PDF that I will post in here. The video will be posted in here. And if you would like to go back and see what I was saying as we headed into this week, you can go back and look at the weekend report from the previous week. You can go back a couple of years and look at those reports. So let's take a look at the indices, okay? We're going to look at them one by one. We'll look at the SPX. Now they all look the same, and that's important. There's information there. The fact that they all look the same. When you have a markets, when the when the stock market is making a big move, when the index of your uh, concern is making a big move, you want to look to see if the others are making the same move. That is confirmation that it is likely a real move. All the U.S. indices were up today, including the Dow Transports, which closed at a new all-time high, I believe. That's something that a lot of people had been concerned about. So the SPX, the NDX, and the Dow all closed at new all-time highs. The New York Composite is close. The Russell is actually very close, and I'm going to show that in just a minute. Now, as far as what are the important levels, well, the levels to the upside, it's there's no way to know. Especially the indices that are trading in new all-time highs, such as the SPX, the NDX, Dow. There's nothing above us that has occurred previously. It's always previous trade activity that can provide some information, valid information, the only valid information regarding potential support or potential resistance. So since there is nothing above us in the SPX, NDX, or Dow, we don't know. Now, we can get clues along the way, but as far as a price level from trade activity, there is none. To the downside, it's this week's lows. That's unequivocal. The This week's lows are extremely important now. This week's lows could mark the low extreme of a distribution and auction market slash market profile terms. And we're probing now for the upper extreme of that distribution. That gets deeper into the weeds of market profile and auction market principles than I'm going to get to in this report. So it's all systems go, apparently. Now we do have this giant gap. It is likely, likely to be tested at some point to one degree or another. That might be tomorrow. It might not be until the new year. You never know. You can't just rote trade this gap stuff. It's just nonsensical among the many nonsensical things in quote unquote technical analysis. But the important message from the day is that the indices, the big money, the money that drives the market, the money that can create conviction and can sustain and hold the levels created through conviction, the big money, the institutions, the hedge funds, are all in and they're buying. So unless this market does something dramatic and turns around and closes below this week's lows on an intermediate to long-term basis, you have to be looking to buy. Now, if you're a short-term trader, that's a different issue. Because you're trading noise, that's an entirely different issue. We talk about that in the live trade room every day. But that, again, that's not the purpose of this report. But intermediate to long term, the bull market continues to deliver. It continues to make higher highs and higher lows. And until that pattern is broken, you have to give the benefit of the doubt to the upside of this market. So this is the SPX. This is this week's low. There's nothing above us. Go over to the NDX. This week's lows are important. You can see we closed at a new all-time high today in the NDX. We closed at a new all-time high in the Dow. This week's low again. And all these lows were put in about the same time as well, which lends credibility to the idea that this week's lows are important because they're all clustered together in the same time frame by all the indices. The Russell. Now, the Russell is really interesting. This is a weekly chart of the Russell. This is today's close. This is the all-time high. Weekly close here. We're not that far from it. This is this week's lows. It's a very, very, very important level. The New York Composite down here has had two huge days, and it's just a smidge below an all-time closing high. I mentioned the transports earlier. The transports closed here in a new all-time high, not print high, but closing high. The equal weighted S&P closed at an all-time high. So across the board, price action is positive. There, you cannot derive anything bearish from current price action. Now, that doesn't mean something can't happen and we reverse, but it does mean that based on information at hand and from today's price action, it's definitively bullish. This market is likely to trade higher before there's anything significant to the downside. You always have to know what would invalidate your view. What would invalidate that view is if this week's lows are, if the indices close below this week's lows. That's another discussion, and we'll have that discussion if and when it happens. Okay, let's take a look at the technicals, which are really interesting. Now, I've been talking about the VIX for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and it's been elevated. It's been elevated since mid-July. And I think it has been elevated due to, we had this event here. And then I think we got into an election type of elevation where markets typically don't like uncertainty. We had to and fro between who was going to win the election, what was going to happen. And now we have a dramatic drop in VIX today from below this 20 level. Now, VIX today is the lowest it's been since the end of September. It will likely go lower than this over the next few days if the market continues to show strength. And last but not least, we'll take a look at the breath work that I keep. I use very simple. I use very few things. I've used very simple things. Now, this is NYSE data, so it's actual market data. The red line is a 10-day moving average of NYSE advancing issues. The green's a 5-day. The histogram is closing breath. So I've been talking about this level being in the neighborhood of short-term lows, even in bear trends. And please go back and listen to the video from this past weekend. Again, you can access that from the webpage I showed before, alexandertrading.com. Click on weekend reports, click on last weekend's date. You can see the PDF, you can see the video from last week. But I talked about this being likely to put in some sort of low time-wise very soon. Well, it did it within 2 days, and we were off to the races. Now, clearly, this is diverging against these previous highs. But if this is the beginning of a new distribution in market profile terms, and this is the low extreme and the upper extreme is going to be somewhere up in here, this will continue. Under a bullish scenario, breadth will continue to expand, and this 10-day moving average of NYSE advancing issues will get back up into this area in here to 1 degree or another. Now, is it diverging now? Absolutely. But again, why is it diverging? What's the context of the divergence? And I think that the context is we're just coming off of a very low extreme. We've had an extraordinary 2 days with an exogenous event that has drove this market into a huge gap and then a huge run up from that gap. I would expect this under a bullish assumption to continue to expand and reach somewhere up in here before there is a top of any relative significance. I hope you guys found this helpful. I will speak with you again probably early Sunday evening. Enjoy the rest of your week.